Thanks for checking out this highlight from the Casually Hardcore podcast. If you want to check out the full podcast after the show, please be sure to hit the top link in the description. But now, let's do it.
EndWalker, hopes, fears, and what we want to see in 6.0. Mrs. Sticks, I'm going to toss to you first and foremost. You're the, I would say, I just know you're Final Fantasy XIV journey specialist. The specialist.
I am not the specialist by any means. I can tell you for EndWalker coming up, I hope that I get to try Sage, but I don't think that's going to be something that's viable for me. For someone that does like the Savage raids, I know already like people are putting dibs on Sage, so it would be pointless for me to go Sage and still want to continue doing like raid content because everyone else is going to be a Sage and I need to be a white mage, or maybe I should go Shield. I know, what is it, Astro, who's losing their shield ability?
We assume, but it would make sense that because they're going into the pure healer category along with white mage. Yep. And so, yeah, then we'll actually see, I think it'll be easier for balancing perspective between the healers themselves. But go ahead.
It's going to end up having to be Sage and Scholar, really, that do the shielding. So I think from a healer perspective, I'm afraid on where I'm going to be needed within the raids, because I mainly main white mage. So I feel like if there are sages, like I'll be able to fit in there if they shield. I feel like I'd be a great addition to that raid, but I can't tell you how many pugs are like, we don't want double white mage, but I did last year double white mage, no problem. Did Shiva.
White mage became just the right choice. And that's why I'm happy to see we're actually getting and going to have 2 barrier versus 2 pure, because I think that's going to help from just a balancing perspective and a game design perspective. Because white mage could shield. Yeah, white mage could do this. You know, it's like, and then it also does these other things, and it just happens to be like, even if it's just slightly better, it becomes the de facto. I said, see you later, Scholar, and it's just been white mage, white mage, white mage, and it feels so good that even like, oh man, I missed my fairy, but I don't miss my fairy enough that it matters, you know? So I was just like, all right, I'm excited to see how the Sage and the Scholar, how, like, what kind of, like, what's the trade-off, right? Because I don't want, like, I felt like this last expansion, we got a lot of healer homogenization. What I don't want to see is that actually happen again, where it's just like, you know, oh, you can either one, like, there's no difference between them. It's just another XP bar or something to level. We'll have to wait and see.
And working with the other healers too. That's going to be very different, having another healer thrown in there. So then I have to learn what their abilities are and how to work together with them. So that's what I'm afraid of. And then I'm excited for what this new class will be. That's still
what
kind
do you guys
of
think?
like,
what do you think it is?
Reaper. That's what everyone thinks so, right?
Everybody's thinking Reaper, and then there's other random theories. Like, people are like, he just did rock bands. Rock equals Geomancer. I'm like, dude, let it go.
I'm hoping, though, that in EndWalker, because in Shadowbringers, we lost more of our class identity. And now, like, so I'm like I main Black Mage and Warrior. I've been playing them since 2.1 or 2.2. And I have always loved Black Mage. Something about it really appeals to me. And I have enjoyed Warrior. I liked that during Stormblood, you had a lot of self-sustainability, and that you could go like 15, 20, 30 seconds when you pop your defensives and you pop your heals. Like, you were immortal for literally like multiple pulls if necessary. And then when Shadowbringers came, they absolutely gutted my class to make us more like the other tanks. And then the tanks just kind of became tanks, and the healers kind of just became healers, as opposed to them having their own individual identity. And I hope that with EndWalker, we don't continue down that route of removing what makes each class special. Because like in WoW, you know, the Resto Shaman is very different to the Holy Paladin. That's very different to the Resto Druid. That's different to the Discipline Priest. Like, they're all really, really diverse. and I feel like that diversity is slowly disappearing in Final Fantasy XIV. So I'm really hoping that's something that I'm concerned about, because like I played Warrior because it appealed to me, and I didn't like that Paladin had like low damage and had a lot of self-absorbs, like damage absorbs.
Yeah.
And like Dark Knight, when it came out in Heavensward, I don't know, like it seemed squishier than the Warrior and the Paladin to me, but it had like higher damage and a larger focus on AoEs. And then the Gunbreaker came out, and like at the end of the day, I always preferred the Warrior, and they're just gutting it further and further, and that's just disappointing.
I felt that way with Warrior when I played it at the media tour. I was like, this is just not like going from like, cause like Warrior, I main Warrior as my tank in Stormblood, and then when I went and played the media tour, I go, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna be playing Warrior this expansion. Chris just stuck it out. I'm like, tip of the hat.
He gave us hammers. We got a hammer. We got a hammer glam. That's the most love we've gotten this expansion. And so like I've got every stage of the relic done on my Warrior so far. Finished my 15 Deliverance, said that's a really cool glow. Apply hammer. So like I got a hammer. I got a dwarven hammer. That's the big win. I have the Fellest of Cleaves. It's the Black Mage of the tanks. And I know like people are like, oh no, dark is all like black and dark. No. Big boom, single big number. This is what I want. The Warrior.
I can relate.
Fell cleave. I'm Hope Warrior. I do feel that Warrior got the most love through the story. Without talking spoilers, through Shadowbringers, I felt like that story was written for Warriors. I'm glad that other classes think it was written for them. They're wrong. It was most enjoyable to play Shadowbringers on Warrior. Fact. So this expansion, I'm a little concerned. I was like, well, what are the odds that I get 2 expansions written for me? It's probably about another class. I bet it's those filthy paladins.
It is concerning though that they are going to end the story that has been going on for what, 7 years now?
I'm excited about that. That's how you welcome new people in. We cannot make this a 700 or 900 or 5,200 hour RPG and be like, well, new players,
get to work,
get going. You got to do it all in order. That cannot be the answer. So like giving them an on-ramp at 6.1 and then saying, okay, New Game Plus is there if you want to go back. That gives them a chance to say, hey, we've gotten better at game design since ARR. ARR was really fun during ARR, but like we've gotten better at game design since then, hopefully. I mean, ideally they're trying to grow as a development team. And so they can say, hey, let's invite people in. 6.0, here's a story, you're kind of en medias res, right? And it's like, whoa, I don't know what's going on. 6.1, here's a new story. And when you have time between patches, we have 16-week patch cycles. Very few people do everything in a patch. Why don't you go back and get familiar with where we came from?
Except then you have less time to actually craft that story, and that becomes an issue, I think, if you're going to begin a story and then end it all within the same patch cycle, like cycle of expansion. Like if EndWalker, as an example, starts its new story in 6.1 and then ends it in 6.5, do you have the time to grow, to become attached to individual characters, and do they have enough time to actually explore everything over the course of those 4 patches?
Yeah, that's actually going to be
Benedict Cumberbatch. The Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock. That jumping to being a longer episode allows them to create a better mystery television show for exactly what you're saying. They have more canvas to develop a story arc, so not every episode needs to be a part 1, part 2. They can say, hey, I have 44 minutes instead of 22. I can actually get a lot done in that time. So that's a valid concern.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, because I mean, it's kind of been maybe hinted at that we would see more smaller kind of stories and things like that. So the question is would they develop another epic, like we've seen from 1.0 to the end of 6.0. I hope that we actually get to see some real ramifications on this, and because we've argued that like if you don't end your story though, like at some point it just becomes a system of Lost versus Breaking Bad. I respect Breaking Bad as an entire series, because they bowed out despite its popularity. They're like, that's the story. Like and they've done kind of like the spinoffs with Better Call Saul. That's all well and good. But like, if they're going to sit here and say like, here's the story, like there's an act 1, an act 2, and Act 3, boom, there you go. And the question is then what do you do with the football then? How does 6.1 pick this up in a meaningful way that has us invested in that? And I'm hopeful that 6.0 is that thing that we just go, holy crap, I can't believe they did this. Nobody, could have ever pulled this off. And honestly, we'll find out what it is. I'm trying not to set my expectations to ludicrous because, they're humans after all, and this is the age of COVID. So who knows what will happen.
I want to go back.
I want
to go to pre 1.0 and understand how we got here.
But looking at the story, no, sorry, go on.
Well, if there ever was a Final Fantasy classic.
No, I don't want to go back and play the gameplay. No, narratively, I want to go pre 1.0. Narratively, I want to go back and understand how we got here.
But talking about the story here, if the game, people often associate Final Fantasy XIV, maybe not necessarily like A Realm Reborn, but after 3.0, people associate Final Fantasy XIV with a well-told narrative. And then on the other side of the spectrum, there's a game like WoW, which every expansion is set around its own story for the most part. Mm-hmm. And people have talked smack about every expansion story, every expansion's lore since Wrath of the Lich King, with the exception of Legion. And that is an example of what could potentially happen with Final Fantasy XIV if they have stories that are told exclusively over a single expansion period. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping they don't go that route.
I think it's going to be interesting to see. So we'll have to check back in with you guys after, especially the launch of 6.0, see how, what's our takeaway, what's our questions that remain, and more. So
I hope that you really enjoyed that highlight, and I hope that you check out the full podcast. Again, link is in the description. Thanks for being here, and I hope you have a fantastic day, you wonderful, beautiful individual.